Welcome to the Recruitment People Podcast, the place where employers and candidates unite to uncover the art of successful recruitment. Hi, I'm Kelly Charity, a recruiter and agency owner with over 2 decades of recruitment experience. In this podcast series, I'm going to dive deep into the heart of hiring and job seeking, sharing actionable insights, expert advice, and of course, a little bit of fun along the way. Whether you're looking to sharpen your hiring practices or navigate your career path, we've got you covered. So let's get started and unlock the secrets to recruitment success together. Thank you for joining the Recruitment People. If you watched our last episode, you would know that we discussed the future of employment 2025, focusing on how industries are evolving due to rapid technological advances with AI. One of the key takeaways was the importance of lifelong learning as we navigate through those changes. So today, we're going to dive deeper into how businesses can future-proof their workforce by building a culture of continuous learning. If you missed the last episode, please have a look. But today I've got Sarah Stone from Linkable on our podcast today, and Sarah's an expert and seasoned individual in learning and workplace development. Her business focuses on helping organizations build and sustain a learning culture. She's worked in a wide range of companies to enhance their workforce skills and ensure they're equipped for the challenges of tomorrow. Sarah's approach is rooted in creating inclusive, adaptable learning environments that foster growth at all levels of an organization. So Sarah's here today to talk about lifelong learning. So, Sarah, thank you for joining today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Excited to be here.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm excited to have you.
Thank you.
So in terms of lifelong learning, obviously for organizations, it can seem like a big commitment to invest in lifelong learning. So what does it mean for a company to build a culture of lifelong learning, and where should they start?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think with the rapid rate that skills are changing, and with the automation that we're seeing and AI coming down the line and changing at a rapid rate, I think for me it's about instilling a culture where learning is supported, growth conversations are had, career conversations are had, and really for that organisation to be doing an audit of what skills are really important to that business, to their people, for the skills they need, is really important, and kind of auditing that every 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, because things are changing, particularly in the technical space, so frequently. So I think rather than that lifelong learning and having a strategy for the next 5 years or a learning strategy, it's really, what are the things we're going to need in the next 2 years, and then reassessing that.
And that leads on to my next question. Like, investing in lifelong learning can probably seem a little daunting to an organization. So where does an organization start to even look at this, Yeah,
and I think it starts with the strategic objectives of the business. What do they want to achieve strategically? What's their growth goals? What's their people goals? And then everything kind of maps that from that. And, you don't need to make that massive. That could start really small and just be, what are the kind of key competencies that we're looking across the business to achieve that will support our goals. Again, having those career conversations with where are you at, where do you want to be, what does that look like, how do we support you to, move to wherever that is that you do want to be. Is that to be the best in your role, or is that to be the CEO in 5 years time? So really just having those growth conversations, super important. But I think, we're seeing that most organizations are changing to skill-based organizations. So, and you would see this in recruitment as well.
Absolutely.
They're not looking at skills for roles, they're looking at skills across the organization and what are the top 5 along every single role. And how does that look different, as you go up, in
makes
role.
Sense. I mean, how can businesses ensure that employees are not only keeping up but also thriving in this type of environment? Obviously, there's a rapid change in technology. Some people aren't going to want to engage in that.
No.
So what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's really important. I think the only thing I've ever seen about AI making roles redundant is for those that don't keep up with AI and looking at how that can help that employee, team member, leverage what they do, and how does it help them in their day-to-day, their week-to-week, their month-to-month. So for me, as long as an employee is keeping up, and that's where I think those bridging programs, particularly if they're not used to using AI in the workplace, or a lot of workplaces aren't using AI at the moment, right? They're still trying to figure out their strategy. So I think it's really about, well, fundamentally, how's AI going to help you in your role so that you're doing the highest value work that you were brought into, you were hired for? How do we sustain you there, rather than so many times I go into organizations and the employees dipping down to layers and they're in the weeds, whereas they certainly could use these tools around them to ensure that they're doing that really important high value work.
It's quite challenging for managers to identify that as well, isn't it? Managers have so much on their plate at the moment. I mean, for managers who feel stretched or poor on resources, how can they create an environment that encourages ongoing learning without, I suppose, overwhelming their teams?
And I think that's just so important around bringing your team on the journey with whatever solution you're going to put in place, or whatever development you are looking to achieve from a business department, team, individual standpoint. Is like, what is the employee wanting to get out of it? Because do you want to just send an employee to a training program and they've got no skin in the game, or they're not driving where they want to go or what they want to do with it? So for me, those conversations, career conversations, as part of, whether that's part of the performance cycle review, are super important, because you can have that connection, what they're looking for, and that might not be formal learning, that could be peer learning, it could be mentoring, it could be, I don't know, an AI program. It just really depends. But I think as long as that employee is driving that conversation with the support of their leader, that's super important. But to your point, there's always going to be that time factor that gets in the way of that development. And I think as long as that leadership, that leader is having conversations about the growth and where do they want to go, and then also if something gets in the way of them actually attending a program, or spending time allocated to growing themselves, it's that leader is ensuring that environment is set up where the employee feels like they can actually make that happen. And I suppose employees can take responsibility for their own learning as well. I think something anyone in the workplace, and generally, like, there's so much change that if they're not taking responsibility for their own upskilling, they could potentially be left behind. Absolutely.
You always need the doers, but it's about keeping up with the latest trends, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, what are some common challenges you've seen businesses face when they've tried to implement a learning culture? And how do they overcome them?
Quite a few, and I think going back to my earlier point, starting small. So I think, what are those critical skills that are going to achieve our people or growth strategic objectives? But equally, I think the focus is definitely shifting from all the data points I see from the conversations I have, is away from the technical focus, which I feel has been really, the focus, before now, and the environment that we're in. But really, it's those soft skills that are so important now, the critical thinking, because you've got this really supercharged engine such as AI or other tools that you're using, where critical thinking is actually the most important thing to be thinking about, or problem solving, or working well in a team and being a really good team member, or being a fantastic leader and inspiring and motivating your team members. So I feel like starting small, a real focus on the soft skills rather than the technical skills. In my mind, they're a lot easier to fill than some of the soft skills, because you usually hire on technical expertise sometimes, or have previously. I'm like hurting the recruiter. Thanks
for that, Sarah.
But you know where I'm going.
I do, absolutely. It's the
sometimes
soft skills that need to be there. They're highly important. I mean, with AI and automation becoming more prevalent, what skills should businesses prioritize in their training and development programs to ensure, I suppose, the workforce remains relevant? It's relevant to business, maybe? And I think if we're not investing in this, we are really doing a disservice, obviously, to the organisation at large, and you're at risk there if you're in an executive position, by not ensuring your team is going to be relevant as we go forward in this
relatively unknown era. But I think things like, really ensuring that your team member, as I mentioned, can leverage AI and the technology around them is super important, so that you're working with and you're kind of like a co-pilot. But then things like resilience, adaptability, being agile, just in this moment of change that's coming down the line so fast, are crucial, as well as I mentioned the leadership skills earlier. So those things that I see, and I look at what's missing in a lot of organisations, and there's certainly ones I think people should be focused on right now.
Okay. I mean, what about managers with remote workers? I mean, how do you, ensure learning opportunities are equal across all employees when you have this hybrid remote working situation? Does that present challenges, do you think?
Look, I think it can, but I think where we've evolved to with the learning technology, for remote workers and workers anywhere, it's a lot easier to kind of pick up modules now, stop, start, no matter what the time zone is, and ensuring that it's a consistent experience, if you're in Singapore versus, in Australia. So I think that with technology, if you have the right technology, that's, I think it can be in a way that's really consistent. And then I guess you're assessing as an organisation, should something be, if it's more a cultural initiative, be delivered face-to-face versus an orientation module experience that could be delivered digitally, and everyone kind of gets the same experience. So I think it's, another thread of that is having the same facilitator do that in different places, or you bring your team together for those moments that matter, is important.
And how do they measure success in terms of the outcomes, not just participation rate? They say, well, everyone's done the course, but, how successful was that? What do you say about measuring?
I think I was swearing to you before, that is like the completion rates, made me get a little nervous. But I think it's definitely we're really focused on the measurement and ROI with businesses. So when we go into an organisation and they've got a need for something, it's like, where are you at now? Where do you want to be? And how are we actually what's going to be the return that you expect to see? Is it kind of increased in speed to competency? Is it increase in awareness? Is it, defining that, but actually measuring that through survey or whatever tool we use. But then we've just had an organisation where we coached 26 people of varying levels in an organisation. We did a pre-coaching survey to feel their confidence levels as certain capabilities, did a midpoint and then an end point. So I think as long as you have a type of measurement to see how you're going, because I just see a lot in the learning space where there's a lot of content providers, unlimited courses, choose your own adventure, go knock yourself out, and it's like, what did you want to achieve with that? So just having a really clear outcome, going back to those career conversations, and the key organisational capabilities, and I think the rest falls into place if you've got a good measurement system.
That makes sense. I mean, if you haven't got a HR department, if you're a smaller organisation, what are the differences, I suppose, or the pressures on the managers to implement a learning or lifelong learning within that sort of organisation, as opposed to somewhere that has a big HR department? Could you help with those sorts of organisations more? Because I suppose the larger ones have their own learning and development anyway, so that's where you come in, perhaps, is it?
Yeah, it is. And we work with a lot of small to medium-sized businesses that don't want their leaders out for 5 to 10 weeks. Might be 5 to 10 hours a week when they're onboarding someone, and if they've got high attrition for whatever reason before we start with them, then that only then takes them out of what they should be doing to that high value work. And so I think for small to medium businesses, it's about scalable, repeatable, systemized learning. So you've got your orientation module, you've got an upskilling program that caters to your key competencies, you've got your compliance modules, there to really bring awareness of how to use compliance in the workplace. So often we go into places and they have a policy, which is wonderful, but what am I going to do with that? I sign that and then I'm not sure what to do with it. So I think for leaders, that's key. Around compliance and understanding how do they have conversations around some of the more compliance aspects. So I think I know we can help small and medium businesses, but equally from an enterprise or a larger organization, it's about, well, what have we been doing for 10 plus years that's not working for us? We've got attrition problems, and we just might need a different set of eyes on it to kind of pinpoint where we might be off track and something better that might work more effectively.
Makes sense. I mean, in terms of obviously like on the job learning as opposed to, I suppose, formal training, I mean, what's the balance between real life learning on the job as opposed to off the job module?
I think definitely a combination of both, and the most powerful learning from everything we see and create experiences for is around that peer-to-peer learning. So for us, we help set that up. So what does that look like? How can you be onboarded in a digital sense, then have those employee leader moments that matter throughout that journey? Then how can they leverage the peer relationship and learn off them as well? So I think it's definitely a blend. I think from a scalability standpoint, you want to have something that is consistent in whatever you do, scalable, but then is not taking leaders away from the really important work, and then they kind of get lost in, in upskilling or whatever. And I think being intentional about something, so that employee driving what they want to learn, and the growth that they're wanting, and then leaning on their leader to go, how might I go about that? And that might be mentoring in the workplace. It could be, a learning program as such. It really just depends what the organisation's wanting to achieve.
So if there's an organisation watching now thinking about these things, what would you say, that you could do to help them? Where would they start if they were to approach you, Sarah?
Absolutely. Usually there's some driving reason. Do we want to be an employer of choice? Do we want to have a better attrition rate or reduction in attrition increase to speed to competency? Do we just want our employees to better understand how they can leverage AI in the workplace? They'll engage us. We will typically do a consult to go, where are you at? Where do you want to be? And then we will come back with a bit of a strategy around how they might go about that with a couple of different options. So then it goes from there. And whether we build them something that is theirs to own, whether we facilitate leadership programs, we work, I guess link things a little bit smarter around onboarding, what knowledge that new hire needs. And I think that plays a huge part, that knowledge economy.
Absolutely.
Finding information in the moment of need is something we really, do a lot in organisations with. And then making sure that they've just got that environment that supports the right tools and the right programs.
And could an employer, a business start small? So just get maybe a module to look at, let's fix up our onboarding, so we start to do that, and then we start looking at the learning piece, and so then they talk to you about that. They don't have to have an all encompassing,
like a 5-year learning strategy. I remember doing that 10 years ago, a huge 100-page document, I think, and I'm just like, those days have absolutely gone. And it's really about what's that critical need that I need to achieve the organisation people goals next 2 to 3 years, and then work backwards quite simply from there. To your point, maybe it's onboarding that's completely broken, and we'll just save time, because everything can be equated that we help with to a saving in time or money or increasing growth and capability. So I think it's just, where are they at? What's the biggest pain point for them or opportunity? And then start small, then build.
Okay. No, that's fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. So I think the takeaways are, start small. Like that's the most important here. Start somewhere. If you've got learning and you're engaging your workforce, and they're on that journey, that's kind of that starting point to say, let's start small and then build out from there.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate coming on, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
That's Sarah Stone from Linkable. If you want any more information, please contact Sarah direct. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thanks, Kelly.